It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up. Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
I'm Craig Price, professional bastard. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, entertaining and engaging speaker Brian Walter joins me to talk about engaging audiences entertainingly. As many of you know, from time to time, the podcast wanders into the speaking profession. I mean, of course, many of my guests are professional speakers, but that's not what I mean. I mean, sometimes the podcast is directed towards speakers and the speaking industry. It's the pool I swim in, so, after knowing Brian for several years through the National Speakers Association, I would see him every year at the convention. His programs have been awesome. He actually invited me on to the Voices of Experience, which is the audio version of the speaker magazine that they put out every year. I knew when he was available in Houston this past weekend, I wanted him on the show because he has a lot to offer, even the most seasoned speaker, on how to engage an audience. I mean, engagement can be tricky because it means so many different things to many different people. And I also know that it's a major priority for meeting planners and event coordinators. It's the big buzzword. It's, are you going to engage them? How are you going to engage them? Are you an engaging speaker? They want something different, and they want something that wows their attendees. Unfortunately, engagement is like pornography. They know it when they see it. When you ask them, they don't know. They're expecting you to do it, and so they can't tell you how to engage an audience. They just know they want you to. And this is where Brian comes in. He is not only an engaging speaker, but he helps other speakers learn how to engage. Some people do it naturally. I like to think myself as a naturally engaging speaker and have been told so. So I do things like walk around the crowd while I'm speaking, while I'm delivering my presentation. I allow questions in the middle of my keynote, which is unusual. Most of the time, they save it for the end, and by that time, you're getting questions that are out of context that would have been better served being told immediately while you were speaking on that particular subject. Of course, not everybody can be engaging. Not everybody knows how to be engaging, and not every presentation lends itself to being engaging. What if you're giving a presentation on contract terms or 401ks or some kind of financial data-driven presentation? Then it becomes a lot harder. So now you know why we have, for today's guest, Brian Walter. You're here in town, and I'm really glad you're here in town because we just saw each other a month ago in NSA National in Indianapolis. But I'm glad you're here because you just spent the last 3 hours talking about engagement. And I think a lot of people find engaging audiences a mystery. Mm-hmm. They know they're supposed to. And in fact, meeting planners always tell you, oh, we want you to be engaging, but they don't really know what that is.
Yes.
And it's kind of, they put it on the speaker to figure that out.
Well, it's funny because most of the time when you even talk to speakers and such and you say, it's like, are you engaging? Oh, yes, I'm very engaging. But then they can't tell you how.
Right.
And so unless you're a natural, you are like the perfect, most naturally engaging person, engagement is a craft. It's things you have to do. Otherwise, you're just hoping that you're engaging.
Well, and I understand that particularly. I have things in my thing where I purposely engage, but I'm actually more of a in-your-face kind of person anyways. I don't speak on stage. I'm down amongst the people.
You're a man of the people.
I'm the man of the people, amongst the people, and so the engagement there is the fact that any moment I may grab someone and talk to them, mm-hmm. and I take questions in the middle of my keynote. I don't mind that. It's kind of like Peter Sheehan. Mm-hmm. You just kind of say stuff. So what are some things that, as a speaker, and I'm here with Brian Walter, no S.
No S.
And I keep on wanting to call you Brian Walters.
If you write a check, it says Brian Walters. It's fine. You can call me Brian Walters.
Yeah, cash all checks. We'll worry about it later. But your company, Extreme Meetings.
Yes.
Is all about engagement.
Yes.
So what is one of the first things that anybody who, even if they're not even that great a speaker, can do to start engaging folks?
Get a reaction, an actual, audible or physical reaction. Now, the whole thing about engaging is you are engaging someone else. If they don't do something, react, scrunchy face, frowny face, get an utterance, move their arm, talk to someone. If they don't actually do something, you haven't actually engaged them. A lot of times you say, but Craig, I'm mentally engaging them. They're like, okay, but that's a bit of a stretch.
Metrics would be nice. How
Metrics
can
are
you
great.
prove that?
Exactly, yeah. So to me, when it talks about engagement, can I get other people to do something in reaction or in connection with something that I'm talking about? To me, that's what engagement really is.
Now, are you of the philosophy there's no such thing as bad press? Because I come from a stand-up background. So we'll take someone who was notoriously engaged with people very bad. Sam Kinison would be screaming and yelling, and Don Rickles, who's amazing and awesome. The way he does it, I wouldn't recommend for 99.9% of the people, but for him, it works.
Well, I think it has to do with what's your intent, what's the outcome that you want, and for them, they want a reaction. They're the entertainers, and with Sam Kinison, it's like I will verbally assault you.
Yeah.
You know, but that's part of the shtick. If you came there thinking that you were going to hear Bill Cosby, you'd be disappointed. You'd be shocked. Okay. With Don Rickles, also, you know, he has the insulting person. I mean, that's his shtick, you know, is to insult, to da-da-da. And if you didn't want that, you wouldn't go. But for speakers, I'm thinking you want to move people either proverbially or physically. You know, you want them to go from A to B in some sort of concept with what your speech there. So yeah, I would say there is such a way as bad engagement if it gets them to do something that you didn't want them to go, or go to a direction where you didn't want them to go, and it's not helpful for whatever your topic is.
Yeah.
But that's probably not most people's problem.
No, it's
I'm so engaging, they're just not doing any of the ways I want.
Well, I think, and I'm going to blame reality television, where engagement. I think people think they need to be edgy, but they don't understand. It's like people who aren't very good at sarcasm don't understand how to do it. So they
I love that phrase. Did you hear so? People who aren't very good at sarcasm. I mean, that's what the world needs. People who are better at sarcasm.
Well, I think sarcasm is a very good tool.
Yes.
And it can be, and usually the people who don't like sarcasm aren't very good at it. But when they try to use it, they think all it is making people feel bad. That's what they think sarcasm is. So instead of saying something like, you know, oh, you got a purple shirt on, and then it's like, what are you trying out for the Joker? They'd go, man, that's an ugly shirt. You look horrible. That's not sarcasm. That's just being kind of a dick. That's being mean. That's being mean. So it's
which is a higher level of sarcasm.
Yeah, I think it's a lower level. It's the easy way of sarcasm. I don't think they understand it. So
Sure.
it's one of those things where there's certain lines you got to worry about. And you're saying that.
Well, I'm saying you definitely could. Sarcasm could be a great tool for certain personality types of speakers or professional presenters of some sort to do things. Though the challenge, though, is I think a lot of people who are great at sarcasm are either entertainers or they're just civilians in normal conversation or things like that. As a speaker or a professional communicator, you're getting paid to make some sort of an impact. And if you can use sarcasm to reveal things, to shine the light of truth on something by using witty, biting sarcasm as a way of nailing truth, then more power to you.
But it all has to come down to, like you said, intent.
Intent and
what
craft,
what is the intent behind the sarcasm? Are you
Yes.
trying to embarrass somebody or make them feel bad, or are you trying to say something, show a hypocrisy, show an irony, or something?
Yeah, and sometimes you would want the audience to feel bad, but not so bad that they don't like you or want you anymore.
Right.
You know? But I mean, because when you think of all of communication in professional speaking is really to getting people to change what they think, change what they believe, change what they do. And maybe it's just incrementally and sometimes it's substantially, but they got to make a shift. In other words, it can't be, that was fantastic. I'm affirmed in everything I already believed and thought.
Or that was great. I'm not going to do any of that ever
Exactly,
again.
yes.
It was nice to see.
Yeah. So if you've got to shift people, then you've got to these are merely techniques to get them to move.
So you want a reaction from them, but mostly it can be a we call a negative reaction, which could be they feel sad or they feel upset, but not to the point where they think you're a horrible human being.
Exactly.
So people, like I said, I feel that they don't understand what an actual engagement is, so they just start like grabbing volunteers out of the crowd and not really knowing what to do with them.
Well, here's like a non-presentational example of engagement. I remembered years ago in the 80s, I worked for a department store called the Broadway. I worked at their corporate office. They were in Southern California. Now they're Macy's like every other
Oh,
department
okay. I was
store
going
in
to
the
say,
world.
I've never heard of the Broadway.
That's because you've never heard of any department store other than Macy's, or
Sure,
JCPenney or something.
Filene's and Sears. I know what department
Yeah,
stores.
so it's like- so I worked
Woolworths?
Woolworths, yes.
It was a-
Gone. It's like- but so Macy's, so I worked for them. They had a concept called shrinkage. All right, and shrinkage is basically how much money you lose through theft or internal
Has nothing
theft
to do
or
with the pool.
paperwork. Nothing to do with the pool or other
Or-
things. Yeah,
or
yeah,
George
okay.
Costanza.
Or George Costanza, exactly.
But it's basically loss. So
it's pretty a loss. So they were trying to make the point to employees at the corporate office about how much money that they were losing a year, and you didn't. It's like because it would be like 3.18%. Well, that doesn't engage you emotionally. That's just a figure. And so what they did is they took a car and then they had cash around it inside this plexiglass giant cube type of thing. And they said, this is how much we lose every day as a corporation. And it was right at the entrance when you'd walk in and you would see this luxury car surrounded by stacks of cash near the security office, of course, and in this plexiglass cube thing. And it was, we lose this money every day. And it made an impact on you because you'd stop and you look and you go, dang. And so suddenly this 3.18% became of, we lose the equivalent of a car plus change every day. We got to do something about this.
That was like when Oprah wheeled out that big wagon of fat. That's when she lost all the weight. She pulled it out and said, "This is how much I lost." And it's just,
Wow.
And you go, "That's that's disgusting." And
Yes, but
B, it's a visual representation. You don't understand that she lost a third grader. It's it's amazing.
A big third grader.
But a obese third grader.
Yes.
But I guess it's the emotional impact. So you think, and I agree with it to a large extent. It's a lot about of emotion.
Well, see, to me, part of it, when I talked about making a shift, engaging, getting a reaction, if I can get you to think something that I intend you to think, that's a form of engagement. For example, a storytelling technique, and here's like a serious thing. Let's say, I don't know, you're a speaker, you're presenting, and you're talking about assurance or confidence or loss or something, but you start telling a story and we suddenly say, okay, I want you to all go back to your childhood and remember that time where as a kid you got lost. All right, now you might have been in the mall, or you might have been on the trip, and it's like, and you were lost. Oh my gosh, and you felt that fear, and then suddenly you're searching for your parents, and suddenly you see your mom, or you see your dad, or you see that relative. They don't see you yet, but then suddenly, I'm going to be okay. Now, when I'm doing this, all of us, almost without exception, can flash back to a time in our youth where we can tap into that emotion. So it's kind of an acting technique, though. But
Sense
still,
memory.
the idea is that. And we think, well, I'm not getting an audible reaction of a gasp, but I'm getting an emotional reaction. I can create a congruent or emotional reaction with the audience because all of us have experienced at one point as a kid being lost in that fear and then that joy of when suddenly you're found or you see the parent before you do. So that's actually in a form of engagement where I'm saying, okay, by telling this type of story and telling you, okay, go back now to that time you were lost. You got that in your mind. Everyone's concurrently having an experience, and that is in a form of engagement because you all went with me on this journey that I wanted you to go on.
Now, for someone like me who's not emotionally, I'm kind of not a Klingon. I'm not a robot. But
That would be a Vulcan. No.
You're right. A Vulcan.
It's a Vulcan. Yes.
You're right. I'm not a Star Trek fan either.
Can you do the thing with your hand?
The great visual as well on the podcast. Yes,
For the record,
I can.
Those of you listening in on this conversation,
I'm
Craig
from-
can do it. He didn't know what a Vulcan or Klingon was, but he
No,
can
I know
do the
enough,
thing.
but I also know. I also
V
know
thing.
that I'm from the Northeast. Hand signals are something I'm very common with.
Okay, excellent.
But I'm not a touchy-feely kind of
Yeah,
person. So for me, when you explain it to me, it makes sense. But how can I get myself into that mindset so I can start? I mean, is there techniques that I can use to try to figure out? Here's what I'm talking about, and it could be anything. It could be a sales report. It could be a presentation that I'm doing. It could just be anything you have to do. Is there a way that for someone who's like not as emotional or may not thinking that way, is there a way to get into that box so we can start plucking the pieces that we can start manipulating people emotionally?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I boil it down too hard?
Manipulating there. It's like, well,
But recall
sure,
that stuff.
it's like using crafted techniques to, yes, achieve goals or manipulating, yes. Well, the main thing I think is to first understand the barrier. In other words, like, okay, so here's a point that I want to make. Why can't I just say the point?
See, that's what I'm thinking.
Right,
It's like,
because that's why you are being brought in as a communicator, because it's not simple. Now, let's say a point that you want to make. Like, for example, you have a
this ought to be
book,
fun.
You have a book called Half a Glass.
You're looking at my book, and I can't
Yeah.
wait to figure out what you think that is.
Okay, so I'm looking at half a glass. Is it half full? Is it half empty? And your thing is it's just half a glass. And so I'm not sure exactly what that means. In fact, what the heck does that mean?
That means it doesn't matter if you have a glass that's half empty or half full. Everybody's working with the same amount of water. So some people have different tools. So some people are negative, some people are positive, some people are a mixture of both at any given moment. But I think people who are labeled negative are automatically dismissed.
Okay, so there's a point. So what I would approach it something like, okay, so people are almost, at least in the U.S. culture, inherently dismissive.
Yes, definitely
of
American
those
culture.
who have a negative point of view,
Which is
So-
roughly 50% of the folks.
Right. Okay. So by just saying that, is that good? Oh, Craig, you're right. I'm so stupid for thinking that. In other words, so the point is that, well, there's the point, but that's not enough.
And I know that, but I want to make sure
my
that
perspective on that's how I would approach that. Of course, I'm an inherently optimistic, person here.
you're super
But
happy. It's disgusting. You got a lovely wife. You got a nice family. Everything's going. I have a lovely wife too, but everything's going
good
great.
recovery. Good recovery.
Yeah,
there.
oh,
Is she listening to this?
No, she doesn't listen. She's not listening.
Okay.
I don't think anybody is anyway. But when we first met you, I'm like, oh, you're nice though. I like you. You're personable. You're funny. You overcome all of your positive attributes. To the point where you can relate.
So for me, I would look at it. So you've got this point about basically, negativity is valuable, or negativity is worthy, or negativity is just as an appropriate a reaction or a perspective. So there's a point you want to make. So from an engagement point of view, I look at it first. Okay, what are the barriers? For me to buy into that? What do I need to get that I don't already get? What do I need to feel that I don't already feel? And so it might be showing the superiority of a negative point of view in certain scenarios. It might be, so in other words, so I first look at it like, how do you engage people? It's like, okay, where are they now? Where do you want them to go? And what barrier do we need to knock down or pierce or overcome somehow to do that? Then it goes, okay, so that's, to me, then the source of, okay, now we're going to use engaging ways, because I can't just tell them, because that's not enough. They got to feel it. Yeah. And so it'd be like, put yourself in a scenario where and it's like, how many of you are, optimistic this is going to work out? Okay, well, statistically, you're going to die in this situation.
You're all going to die.
Like, for example, I remember when I worked for the Broadway department store in the executive management training program at age 22, and I remember one of these first training simulations. It was called the Desert Survival Skills type of thing. I think we're all.
What kind of department store do you work at?
Well, no,
you have to have the desert survival training.
Well, it was a training. It was a training type of thing, but it was some exercise. And here was the big point was they're showing consensus versus your own point of view on something. And so basically, they say you're in a desert and you've crash landed in the plane, and they didn't know where you were going because your pilot didn't file a flight plan or something, whatever it was. And they said, okay, here's all these objects that you have, and you have to force rank them in the importance of them. And then then we'll score you based on how a professional survivalist would say you would, And things like you have a mirror, you have a jacket, you have matches, you have salt tablets, you have a half a canteen of water. So they have all these different things. And then you would rank it, and then you would then do a consensus at the table, and then you would average your scores. So what the deal was, it's like there's certain things you believe, like, okay, so I don't need the jacket, it's hot. And they're like, actually, that was number 2, because tonight it's going to be very cold and you're going to freeze to death. So you can go a couple of days without water before you die, but if you don't have that jacket, you're dead. And so I remember going, and it was the difference. They took the average of our individual scores and then our consensus table group score. And basically, as individuals, the vast majority of us died.
Sure.
And when a consensus, the vast majority of us lived. So to me, that was an aha. It's like, wow. So we had to move beyond where I think I'm pretty smart and I know what the answer is to, Brian, you died. You're dumb. Okay? You didn't even live to the next morning. So you need
You're eaten by wolves.
exactly.
You fed the rest of the survivors.
Exactly. It's like the survivors are like, we wish Brian was meteor.
First thing we did is we wait for Brian to die, which took about 6 hours.
Exactly.
Because he got emotional and killed himself. Then we fed off Brian for 3 weeks.
Exactly. So, like, to me, that was, and again, that's a training thing, but that was a simulation that was intended to show that you, Brian, as an individual, are not necessarily as smart as the collective. So the idea of, collaboration and teamwork with your team members, you should listen to other people's opinions besides your own. Now, if you just said, Brian, you should listen to other people's opinions behind your own. Yeah, I think I'm pretty smart.
Well, first off, you're not going to. I'm not going to listen to that opinion.
Exactly. But then they did this exercise where it's like, okay, so statistically, 3/4 of you died at the table. So maybe teamwork's a little more than you think it is. So that it kind of shifted what I thought. So now, of course, that took a long time, but in speeches and things like that, if we look at, okay, what shift do we need to make? You think you're smarty pants? Okay, so we need to show how, for example, in your case, I would say, how I would approach it would be where the optimistic glasses half full point of view is something to lose money, get you killed, cost you time, basically be rose-colored glasses, you're just a fool to assume that that's always the right answer. And if you can get me to feel that and go, now I'm going to now be more open to, now here's where the glass is half empty point of view. Well, you need to have colleagues like this or you're going to go out of business. You're not going to make as much money.
Yeah, that's always about using my whole philosophy is using tools that are available to you at the time. Mm-hmm. So if you have a negative person, instead of ignoring them, use them. It would be like explaining all that stuff and then saying, well, you don't like the way that jacket looks. So it's not fashionable, so I'm not going to use it. Mm-hmm. That's like almost ridiculous to ignore something they've given you and they've told you this will save your life. Yeah, but khaki is really not my color. It's I'm more of a spring than a fall. Yeah. So the engagement is really getting the emotion out. And like I said, for someone like myself, I do that, and I've learned over time that I've had to. I've had to break down that barrier real early only because of precondition. Mm-hmm. They hear the word negativity and they think I'm going to come in and do a rah-rah, we're going to walk on fire, burn our feet, be happy, catch people, and do all kinds of stuff because they're geared to think one way. So that's a barrier. Mm-hmm. So you got to find the barrier. What's the next thing we can do? Because now that I've figured out what the barrier is, how can I... It's one of those things that I don't think of emotional situations. I'm very analytical and clinical sometimes. So I'm thinking, well, this is what you need, A, B, and C, and D. I'll worry about how it feels after the fact. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get them to react. We're going to find out what the barrier is.
And we're going to do techniques to get them to do...
how can we
interact with it?
I said, what are the techniques that the person like me? I'm the one that's going to have to do the techniques. So how do I get in that mindset?
One is find safe ways for people to be wrong.
Okay.
And safe ways to be people to be wrong. I call them non-trivial trivia. And so that is, for example, if I put on the screen, okay, according to blah blah blah, this source here, the answer is this or that. Choose. I make you commit. Now, even though you're in part of a group and you're going A or B or true or false or fact or crap or whatever it's going to be, you're either audibly reacting because I asked you to, or you're mentally, because no human in the audience who's awake, when I say, is it A or B, I have no answer. Your brain picks one and you want to be right and you want to know what the correct answer is and you think B and the answer is B. Yeah, exactly, because I'm smart. And the answer is A. Crap. It's like, so part of engagement is getting people to commit to a reaction and then either correcting them. Now, I'm not saying and now it's like I've got Craig in front of everybody. It's like, it's like, are you a hero or an idiot? Okay, that's a high risk, I'm
going to emotionally pull your pants down in front of everybody.
Exactly, and that's not good unless there's pretty high incentives for you to experience that. But still, the idea of, by putting in a place where you make a choice and then you can find out that you're wrong. It's a very motivating thing to be wrong because we don't like to be wrong. And so that will change our perspective on things. So one is giving people a choice that they can be wrong. Another engagement is let them express their perspective on something, but then they have to hear somebody else's perspective on something. And so, I'm engaging because I'm telling you what I think, but now as part of the reciprocal part of that engagement, I now have to listen to what you think, because in our social, mindset of, in the US, you can't just say, I'm just going to tell you what I think, Craig. And the second part of the exercise, actually, I'm just going to plug my ears and not listen to you. Now, I mean, we can't do that. We have to listen to you.
You obviously haven't seen the news lately, or what goes for the news.
Well, see,
'Cause
but-
usually it's just two people barking at each other, and the only reason they're listening at all is so they can find something that they can use against them and beat them over the head with it.
Yeah, and that's not it. That's not in. I wouldn't say that's engagement.
No,
Because-
it's not.
Because we're
It's the listening part that have the biggest problem.
But as presenters, though, it's like when I say, okay, so we're going to turn, to the person next to you, and you're each going to share your perspective on X. Now, for me, the trick is, and I do this with individuals and with tables, what makes something engaging is when you have less time to accomplish that communication challenge than you think you need. Like, for example, I have a technique I call hot table topics. Now, in any group you've ever been into, and it's like, and now it's time for table time, Craig and group. What's going to happen is at your table of 8 here, you're going to say, what are some of the top ways we can improve customer service at our organization here? One of you needs to be the scribe, and you've got about 45 minutes. Go.
45
And
minutes.
everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is way too long.
At minute 9, people are committing seppuku. They're just trying to get through.
So what happens is like those who are verbally assertive type of people, like, oh, brainstorming, there's no bad idea. I love this. We can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And they're just going on and on and on and on. And you and I, meanwhile, have gone, so what are you doing this weekend? I don't know. It's like, and we're talking about the speaker, we're gossiping. And about the last, 4 minutes. Oh, there's 4 minutes left. We should probably engage. Okay, where are we at the table? Could you tell me? And then we kind of take charge. We jump in and we contribute at the very end. Because the problem is you have too much time and too many choices. Now, what I do to make it more engaging, as we say, same type of thing, we're going to have you break up as tables and you're going to brainstorm 3 ways that this company could improve customer service. However, there's 3 categories. One is easy. Easy is something you could accomplish in 30 days or less, doesn't cost money, doesn't require permission, probably pretty small return, but it's worth doing. You're going to come up with a hard solution. A hard solution is something that's going to take more than 30 days to do. It might require budget, might require permission, to do. But if we did it, bam, the outcome would be much better. And you have to come up with an outrageous idea, something so bold that if you guys aren't scared and your first reaction is there's no way they would do it, it's not outrageous. Now, you have to have a consensus at your group that your idea fits into the easy, hard, or outrageous categories. Everybody got that? Okay, you've got 7 minutes, go. And everyone, you watch it physically, they unconsciously lean forward and everybody immediately starts talking and arguing because now we've given them criteria. Because the people who like structure, like Craig, that he said it had to be easy, meaning 30 days or less, or I don't have to get permission. Your idea requires permission. It can't be an easy idea.
The hell you say? Oh,
Then
sorry.
you're wrong. It's like, no, because, well, wouldn't you have to get permission? Well, yes. Well, then it has to be in the hard. Well, that's never, well, then you better come up with a better hard one. I mean, so people are actually arguing and tussling is good when we're jointly doing this. And you can be a negative person, you can be a positive. This is all good. Then what happens is then I start, okay, you only have 3 minutes left. And people start glancing at me with really negative things. We need more time. And what happens is, every single time, without question, the groups beg me for more time. Can we have some more time? Okay, you can have 3 more minutes. Thank you. And so you stretch it out to 3 minutes or 12 minutes. Then it's done. And because you're getting people structure, and they're tussling and arguing. And then I said, okay, now we're going to debrief this here. And now I want you to share what your easy idea is. I don't care if you just have an easy. What do you think is the best easy idea? Which table thinks they have got the best easy idea? And so now it becomes internal competition. It's like, okay, because at the end we're going to go by applause. We're going to vote. I'm just going to take a couple here. Don't give me any lame ones here. No, we got a good one. So people are like, argh. And then you get easy ideas and people start spontaneously applauding. Yeah, dang, that's good. Yeah. And then it's okay, now the bold time, outrageous. Now, to give you an example of an outrageous idea, I was doing a thing for a bank. And the topic was, how do we build good bench strength? In other words, how do we prepare the next generation of managers or
Succession planning.
supervisors? But it was at the branch level.
Well, right. It was,
Right.
Yeah, but
So one of the outrageous ideas that a group came up with, they said, okay, you know how we oftentimes will tell an assistant manager that you can shadow me for 3 days. Shadow me for and what to do. They said, what if we said for 3 days you are the branch manager and we'll live with your decisions as long as they aren't out of compliance? And everyone went, no. And I said, for the vast majority of you, it's like, you're right, you couldn't do that. But how would that person feel if you said, no, you can ask me questions, but you are the branch manager for 3 days. As long as it's not illegal or out of compliance, we will live with your decisions for 3 days. And people are like, wow. I said, that's a level of engagement. Now, again, it was inspiring just to hear the outrageous examples. But again, we gave people a structure. We caused people to tussle and argue. Different personality, positive, negative people could go in. And we were controlling what they were doing. But again, you gave them structure. You gave them less time than they think they had, to do it. And all different personality styles were able to do it. And then you tapped into competition. That was inherently engaging.
It's basically using human nature.
Yes,
to
for
put
good.
Of competition, of pressure,
Yes.
of and being able to express themselves for good.
Yes, for
their own things.
Yes.
But we've only got a couple more minutes left, and one of the things I wanted to bring up is that I know you do a lot of meetings, and you do a lot of big meetings. You do a lot of engaging things like that. And a lot of meeting planners actually listen to the podcast because I've gotten emails, and they've told me how much they enjoy guest X, or they love me, or most of them are for guest X. But what like I said, a lot of meeting planners don't understand what that engagement is. Like you were just talking about engagement, and unless it's let's get someone on stage and talk to them, what are the mistakes that you see meeting planners make before they hire you about misconceptions about what engagement really is?
I think that the mistakes that they make is they ask for engagement, and they believe the speaker when the speaker says yes, they can be engaging.
Because that's a more ego situation.
No, I mean that they said because they're so desperate for engagement. It's like, now a key thing that our stakeholders have told us, Craig, is that we have people from all across the country who are coming here. They don't normally see each other. So, do you have like techniques or exercises? Or is there something you can do to to foster an internal networking or something like that? And you go, yes.
Well, speakers will do that because it's like I said, their ego is going, I can do
They
this.
say yes, and then the meeting planner goes, great,
and that's it.
and that's it. And because the meeting planner doesn't know, is that a BS yes, or is that could be a best practice? So by saying it's like, so if the speaker says yes, excellent, shoot me an email with some of the techniques that you do to get the engagement. If there aren't techniques, then they're BSing. Because engagement, it's either a miracle happens because the speaker is unconsciously competent at being able to do that, but if so, they don't know that they are doing that. And so when they said yes, they don't actually know that. But if they're consciously competent at it, then what happens is they can say, yes, here are the things that I do. And if they describe it to you and it sounds engaging, then there you go. But actually have them step up and tell you how they're going to be engaged. They're going to creating this level of engagement, because it's like, well, I pose a question to the audience. Oh, well, who doesn't do that?
I was going to say that I literally got there's a speaker I followed one year, and one of the questions before they hired me, and I know this speaker and I know what he does. They literally said, you're not going to say, raise your hand if you've done this. Because apparently this guy did it 58 times in a 1 hour presentation. And I'm like, no, I do not ask anybody if they've done something, and it's just rhetorical questions. If I want to ask them questions, I want to hear something. So they actually will start seeing that this BS is asking a question that's rhetorical is not engagement.
It's anti-engagement, because now it's kind of like, who here prefers to suck in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide? Anyone?
Oh, well,
Yes,
now you're getting controversial on us.
So who here wants to be a success? No, I want to be a loser. Of course they're going to. It's like, so if the meeting planner says, I'm asking for that level of engagement, that's really important, and can you do that? They say yes. It's okay. Give me some of your techniques, and then they say something. I ask provocative questions to the audience. Okay, then say, great. What are some of those questions? Then if it's like, how many of you here want to be success? Then you realize, okay, just don't hire them. Don't sign the agreement. But on the other hand, they say it's like, well, I ask, the first question I ask is, it's like, okay, what is the barrier to, in other words, for example, like, I'm just making something up in the spot. I would say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how cynical are you right now? That's a pretty thing. Okay, write that down on a card. Keep it anonymous. Do not put your name on this. It's like, okay. So cynicism, then I tell the audience, cynicism comes from unacknowledged frustration with barriers that are keeping you from doing your job to the level you think you're being held accountable for. So write down what that barrier is that's preventing you from doing the job. It's like, okay, instantly right now it's like, oh, people are engaged. It's like, oh yeah, so you just said use the cynical word? Oh yeah, and so you're putting down the barriers. So if someone said that was a technique, then I, as a meeting planner, would say, okay, here's a pro. They know how to do that. But if it's like I ask them a series of questions like raise your hand, how if you'd like to be successful, or raise on a scale of 1 to 5, how successful would you like to be in the next 6 months? Oh come on, come on.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah, who wants to be who wants to be a millionaire? I mean, come on.
Well, last thing, and then I want to make sure that the people know Extreme Meetings does a lot of cool, interesting stuff. You're not just asking provocative questions that are legitimate.
Yeah.
Explain a couple of the cool things that you guys do, because you do a lot of games and.
Sure, I would say the two most magical things that we do are parody music and interactive audience games. Now, parody music. Here's a thing that I like to go to clients, and I would say, you've heard of the phrase "unsung hero." They're like, well, yeah. I said, think about why do we have that phrase in our society? Because since antiquity, one of the highest honors you could possibly have would be a song sung in your honor.
Yeah, a Lear or the Greeks are playing on something. Yeah.
Well, now we have rock and pop and country music. So I said what we do is we take familiar songs and we change the lyrics to highlight teams, individuals, or accomplishments where we are literally singing your praises. Which groups within your company are the unsung hero where we're going to say at this meeting that ends? And that, whoa, and so that, this department or this division, they and so literally we are singing their praises, because I like to say music is a straight shot of people's emotions. And sometimes, like we had, I mentioned the Washington State Gambling Commission doing a thing. Washington State Gambling, and because of tough times, their raises are actually voted on by the legislature. So they had a raise that had been voted upon, and they're getting it, okay, but then it got rescinded because of bad news.
That's awful.
So they're just completely hacked. So they're going into this meeting, and the executive director is, Brian, our people are so hacked off, but it's not my fault. I can't help that the governor, executive order, canceled this thing. And so he said, what are we going to do? I said, what we're going to do is we're going to do a protest song. And so we got up there, and so we had Bob Dylan, mock Bob Dylan, get up there and they go, how does it feel when your raise gets taken away? Makes you want to tell the governor that he needs to shut up. And so we got people on their feet. Yeah! We made a musical catharsis where their executive director is standing with them chanting, fight the man, fight the... I mean, they got into the whole protest angle of it, and it was a catharsis, and they got that negative energy out of the way. And then we could talk about new ideas and things like that, because I said, until you address that issue, they're not going to hear anything you're going to say. That was a magical moment where we used music in, a 2-minute mock pop song or folk song to articulate what they felt and let it go. That's magic. And so you can do that for celebratory purposes, and you can use it to humorously, like in basically musical sarcasm, to tell truth that they couldn't tell straight.
And see, we wrapped it all up from the beginning to the end. You also do much other things. They can find you where?
Either extrememeetings.com or brianwalter.com.
No S. I keep wanting to say Walters. They are disassembling this entire room around us. So I wanted to thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you have a meeting and you need someone that is completely different and actually engaging, not just says it, Brian Walter, that's the man.
And if you also want to see half a glass and see the power of negativity, there's Craig right there.
We'll edit that part out. But thanks.
Okay.
That's it for this week. I want to thank Brian and his lovely wife, Karen, for giving up their time on a Saturday to not only be on the podcast, but have lunch with me while in town. Always great seeing them. Remember, you can find the podcast on Twitter at RealityCheckPod. You can like our page on Facebook and hear the podcast in your timeline. Sharing it with others wouldn't hurt either. And on iTunes, where a review certainly wouldn't hurt. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.